howdy. Welcome to TYtalks 6, the meaning of the cross. This is a talk about crosses as symbols. It's not a Christian talk. It's also not a non-Christian talk. This is a generic talk. I try to only talk in generic terms because I'm wise enough to recognize that all the people I love, which includes Christians and non-Christians, are all actually the same. They're all a lot like me. We're all brothers and sisters. So that's the place I come from. I think if we want to talk about Christianity for just 2 seconds, that's probably where Christ would have come from too, right? Okay, so back to just the generic. The generic's where it's safe for all people. I'm trying to create a circle safe for everybody, not just for one group. I think there's a lot of us with that notion. So let's cast bigger nets here, broader nets, and let's enter the cross as a symbol, not as a representation of something about crucifixion. Even in the Bible itself, Christ talks about pick up your cross and follow me. He's not talking about the crucifixion. The cross, even as a Christian symbol, has nothing to do with the crucifixion on the basic elemental level that Christ himself used it as a teaching tool. So I'm going to go back to that more elemental level I believe he was referring to when he said pick up your cross. I'm more into the blues. The blues talks about the crossroads, and that makes a lot of sense to me. I also like Christ, and when he talks about picking up the cross, I get that too, because I've had to pick up my cross a lot in life and accept things that were very hard. So I also really like Native American uses of the cross, and of course other indigenous people around the world. You know, where the cross is, again, an elemental symbol of balance. So you can use the cross, for example, as the yin-yang. Or, you can use the cross as horizontal, vertical in like the idea of marksmanship, like aiming for something. So we're familiar with that through the scope of a rifle. There's that notion of lining up the axes, as in mathematics and all kinds of like left brain analytical planning for how to hit a mark. So the cross is I think a generic art symbol, a universal symbol. And I've decided to talk about this right here because this is a little spot by the Bitterroot River where we have a sweat lodge in Missoula. Not me as in we, but as in the Montana community here in Montana. We have a nice sweat lodge by the Bitterroot River that's part of the university's Native American Studies program. And they've built a nice circle of stones, cross, I guess what we call the sun cross, or many names for it, here in stone, and today it's snowy, and I knew it would kind of be visible in a subtle way, so I thought, well, this might be a fun place to come show all this stuff. But back to the meaning of the cross. This isn't really a very long or complicated talk or process. I'm just trying to reiterate and show, because I have talked about this in the previous video, that the cross is a really practical symbol that is so helpful, and I use it every day in therapy all hour long. I use it in my own life all day long in my head. This is serious shit. Whoops, excuse my French. But it's like that, okay? Now back to the peace sign. Okay, the idea of the peace sign is very similar to the cross, okay? This use of, you have both sides of the story, you're including both people's needs and concerns, or else you're only including one, okay? And that's not peace. So we have a sense that one direction is peace, where both sides of the story exist. One direction is non-peace, where only one person's side of the story exists, and they're a control freak, and it sucks around them. No, I'm teasing, but you get the point. Okay, so we all can be that guy at times, right? Back to the yin-yang snowman and the righteous mind. So, okay, so let's talk about the cross. The golden rule says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And that makes a lot of sense. It is a cross image. It's saying that you have to consider context or other as well as yourself. But it sort of starts with you as the important part, as you would have them do unto you. Now, the Hopi way, blend and celebrate, is very similar. But it's a little more suggestion we better start with the other or context, like blend, like figure out what's going on, where you are, acclimate, orient. Then decide what you're going to do with the I want, I feel. Okay. Either tradition, though, you got to get the balance. So you can start from either side. You can think about yourself and what you want, and then you can think, well, to get that, what will I need to do? Okay, so then it brings you to context. Or you can notice others first, which is delightful. And some people are more that way naturally than others. And I think we shouldn't beat ourselves up if we're not that kind of person. And we shouldn't be too, high on and mighty on ourselves if we are this kind of person, because it is a pleasant kind of person. But some people naturally are very easily able to start noticing others' needs. They just aren't very selfish. They don't have a lot of needs themselves. And God bless those kind of people. But other people, are more urgently aware of what they want and need. But either way, like I said, you can find this balance. So you can kind of, as an ideal, hope for that Hopi way of blend and celebrate. And I'm going to act that out here. So blend, I'm going to think about what others and the environment needs first. Walk in that cross, I'm going to make that line in the sand. This is what others are needing around me. Now, I got to figure out if my neighbor is having trouble because their roof is leaking, and I can see that, and I've heard them complain about it. What can I do to help? So now I'm going to put me in this. So I go talk to the neighbor. He says all he actually is waiting for is a saw, because he has a bunch of stuff he got to fix it, but his saw is broken. I say, I have that saw you need. I bring it over. We get started on the job together. He tells me, you can go home. I got it under control. It's problem solved. That's the dumbest example I ever heard. I'm horrible at thinking of examples. You have to forgive me. But I'm like that. It's okay, though, because the point's incredibly good, isn't it? Even if it's a bad example. Which is that whether you start with noticing something isn't working well for others, instead of judging someone for a shortcoming, notice they need a little help there. How can I help? Okay, same thing. I notice I have a need, something's important that I don't have. I'm going to love myself from my parent mind, like I am a precious child, like I matter. I'm going to try to figure out, well, how am I going to get myself that thing I need? Well, I'm going to look around me and figure out, in the context I'm in, how do people get that? So what I'm saying is this cross thing, it's an elemental way of seeing self and other, the two sides of the story, the yin and the yang, the his way, her way, or any kind of dualistic, polarized kind of problematic two-sided coin. You can find a balance point is what I'm saying. And we find it at the crossroads, at the meeting ground between the two extremes. When we have these two sides really integrated and working well together, then we've achieved wholeness or balance, right? And that's when the circle comes around the cross, okay? Because the circle coming around the cross represents that we've achieved the balance, that we're working with our higher power as two, separate parts. Again, these are all just word choices you can make. If you're an atheist, it's just as realistic to say the words, hey, pretty neat that you and I can both work with reality together and get things done. Yes, that is neat. Or if you're, spiritual, you may say, hey, isn't that cool the way we can kind of meet where we're at and find our commonality and our uniqueness and figure out how that relates to one common thing and also our sort of extreme of difference. Again, I'm being goofy and trippy. It's just to make a point, though, that there's ways to find these balances. And when you work at it, it does feel magic. When you achieve that with a lover, with a best friend, with a work partner, and you get stuff done, you feel so amazed. You're like, wow, did you see how that worked? And the serendipities and miracles and patterns that will show up when you're doing that will blow your mind. And I have to tell you, even one of my close friends who's an atheist, I've watched this magic open up in his life. I watched him organize a night disc golf round once with glow discs. And you know what happened? He was so nice, he organized it, and right a couple holes in, when there were a bunch of people crowded around, he threw this throw from 100 feet away that went in the basket. And he wasn't that good yet at that point. I'm not great myself. But the point being, I watched that unfold right there. I watched him kind of create this good energy for the group, for the hand. And I watched him get to shine that night with a little pat on the back from the magic of things. Now that's how I see the world. Again, I'm open to the magic. That's cool. I'm not wildly religious, but I'm deeply connected to the magic, I'll admit. But even if you were an atheist and you think that magic's my little, goofy mind, which, I'll admit it is partly my goofy mind, I would say still that experience when you work with others and you experience teamwork, the experience of hand versus just being finger, is equally magic. So what I'm speaking of, I guess we'd have to throw in the category psychology, just because it's equally valid for atheists and spiritual people, for Christians, non-Christians, for any two groups of people, because it's generic, universal info. And that's why all around the world,